Good afternoon, everybody. Today is September 24, 4 p.m. It's the special Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting. May we begin with the roll call, please?
Before I proceed with the roll call, Commissioner Lau will not be attending tonight's GWP Commission meeting.
Okay.
Commissioner Venetian,
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan,
Present.
Commissioner Jasmadarian,
Here.
President Katikian.
Here. Okay. Next item is the consent item.
2A, approval of the August 3rd, 2020 meeting minutes.
So for our fellow commissioners, I'm just going to go in an alphabetical order. I'll call your name. If you want to comment or suggest anything, feel free to chime in at that time. So with that being said, Commissioner Avanesian, any comments or questions about the minutes?
No, actually.
Okay. Commissioner Flanagan, any comments or questions about the minutes?
No, nothing. All right.
Commissioner Jasmadarian, any questions or comments about the minutes?
No, nothing.
I don't have any comments either, so could we get a motion to adopt?
I motion.
All right, we got Commissioner Jasmadarian who motioned, and Ms. Godinez, do we need a second and a vote?
I second.
Second, all right, everybody? Aye? All right, Commissioner Flanagan, you're on mute, there we go.
Aye. Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
I think it's
Aye.
adopted. All right, next item, please.
3, GWP Commission staff comments.
All right, again, so let's start with the commissioners. Commissioner Avanesian, any comments you'd like to make?
No, I don't have any comment.
Commissioner Flanagan, any comments you'd like to make?
I'm sorry, is it comment in general as we start this special meeting?
Yeah, it's the GWP Commission staff and comments. That's the agenda item.
Okay, I'll hold off here. I'm very excited about this meeting. I think we're doing some really good things.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Jasmadarian, any comments?
No, no comment.
Okay. I don't have any comments. I'll give an opportunity to anybody else from staff if they want to comment.
Yeah, Mr. President, I just wanted to mention that because the item had come up in a discussion, I believe, with Mr. Flanagan and Ms. Lee about updating you all regarding the heat that we have been going through and how our system has held up, and where some of the things that we've seen in this, what seems to be a growing, an alarming trend of higher heat, higher nighttime heat, and longer periods of heat. So, but because I wanted to focus the special meeting on the items at hand today, and our next regularly scheduled meeting is only about a week or so away. I think we're on the 5th is our regular meeting. I have agendized a report to you all about that, and we've got another heat wave coming in, although I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as severe as what we've already faced. But it'll give us an opportunity, as we try to do every year at this time, to give you a third quarter update, which is where we hit high heat and how we fared and some of the things that we learned. So I just wanted to mention that.
And thank you, Mr. Zern. Anybody else would like to comment?
This is Ron. I just, since last time I was absent, I want to congratulate for the new commissioner that joined us, and they will have for sure our full support. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go with the next item, which is the action item.
4, action items. 4A, recommendation regarding 3 proposed clean energy programs. 4A1, residential and commercial demand response and smart thermostat program, an online marketplace offered by Franklin Energy Services, LLC. 4A2, commercial direct install energy efficiency report offered by Lime Energy Services Co. and 4A3 single-family and multi-family residential virtual plant offered by Sunrun Inc. 4AB, motion providing recommendations to the city manager and city council.
All right. And Mr. Zern, I know you're going to be presenting, but so that we make this as smooth as possible, did you want to have questions as you're presenting, or should we hold off the questions all the way at the end, and then we can go back to any particular slides and anybody could ask questions? I'm just asking it because in the past it was easier to do it in person right there and then, but this is different times.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point, Mr. Kadikian, and if at all possible, we'd like to get through the presentation and then get to the questions and start really getting into some of the details and questions that you may have. Certainly, as we go through a slide, if there's anything that doesn't make sense, or there's an acronym, or there's something we say that isn't something you might be familiar with, please stop us so we can elaborate on that. And then and this is going to be a team effort, so you're going to see a number of faces and hear a number of voices that are going to go through different sections of this. And this is really the team that has worked so incredibly hard to put this together. As you're going to see, we've still got a lot of good work ahead of us, but we're really happy with where we're at, and we're happy with the ability to take these very valuable programs and incorporate them into our portfolio to create, yet again, as I've said many times, a very diverse and a very effective portfolio. And I think the success of our agency going for a renewable and clean is going to depend on that diversity. Not only technology, the diversity in our technology, but diversity, as we've said before, geographically, so we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket, and we're prepared to manage the peaks and valleys that we're going to get into. So with that, if that's okay, I think we could really do a lot of good work at addressing the meat of your questions at the end. But again, anything that doesn't make sense, please stop us. We'd be happy to explain that.
All right, the floor is yours, Mr. Zern. Go ahead.
All right. So let's go to the first slide that we have up, and I'm really kind of just introducing this, and then we're going to move through the team. But this is a recap of what occurred in July 23rd, 2019. This is where we got the council direction, and this is really what they accomplished as a council at the meeting and what they directed us to further do. So they approved our 2019 Integrated Resource Plan, which has subsequently been submitted to the California Energy Commission and approved and accepted by the California Energy Commission. We're very proud of that. They authorized a limited notice to proceed for the development phase of the Glendale Energy Center. That's the part of would be the repowering of the existing equipment. And as you may recall, it included some level of thermal and battery storage. That's a topic for us to discuss at a later date. It will be coming back to you for thorough discussion on that phase of it. And today, it's this next bullet that's really important. The council authorized the Clean Energy Program negotiations to get the best possible deal for us and for our ratepayers with 4 firms. And that was eventually narrowed down to 3 firms, and that's where we're at today. So today you're going to see the highlights of the 3 firms' programs as they proposed. The first is Franklin Energy Services, we have Lime Energy Services, and then we have Sunrun Incorporated. And again, that's where we're going to focus today. The council went on further to ask us to give them, before any finalized purchase of the internal combustion engines, batteries, and so forth, that we would have at least 60 days ahead of that a report on where we were. So in other words, they wanted to look at other options that may help us to further reduce the amount of thermal or new thermal that we were proposing. That included things like additional behind the meter applications. Is there any possibility of additional transmission? Renegotiating with LADWP requiring reserve requirements, options to reduce and eliminate the need. Again, that's the real overriding theme, eliminate the need for the additional new thermal units, and also to develop a plan and goals and methods to potentially achieve 100% clean energy earlier than the state mandate of 2045, and in this case 2030. On that note, on that bullet, let me just briefly, because again we're focusing today on on these three firms and the proposals they've made and the financial analysis, and then where we need to go from there. But all of these things are continuing to take place. We are continuing our negotiations with LADWP. We were able to give, as these are as still at this point confidential matters, able to give council an update on this. We continue to look for options on how we can reduce the number of thermal units. And we recently received council's approval to extend our contract and to increase our contract with Ascend Analytics, with the primary purpose of not only maintaining the integrated resource plan that we already have developed and the model that's the basis for that, but more importantly to do this last bullet to accomplish our review of what it might take to get to 100% clean, that 15 years earlier. Is it possible? And if it is possible, what are some of the factors that we would have to look at and hope, and we would also obviously inject cost analysis in there as well. So that's where the council left us. And then from there, the team went to work with those three firms that we listed. And I think we're going to start off with Christine Godinez to give you a brief overview, and then we'll dive into each one of the individual firms.
Hello, this is Christine Godinez with the City Attorney's Office. And before we get into descriptions of the three specific clean energy programs that Glendale Water and Power is presenting you today, I just wanted to give a high-level overview of the complexity of what GWP has been working on. It's a pretty large team of folks at GWP that have been working very hard on this for over a year now, perhaps close to 2 years now, since the clean energy RFP went out. And there's just a myriad of issues crossing all aspects of not only the GWP organization, but the city organization. Everything from, what staffing needs are to, what are the background checks for the employees for these vendors? What are they going to be wearing when they're out in the field for safety, for our public, to metering issues, interconnecting, solar assets to our system? What does that look like? What is the permitting process? Who does marketing? What does that look like? IT issues, cybersecurity concerns, data sharing, ownership, regulatory concerns related to renewable energy credits, measurement and verification of energy efficiency, all these things that we need to take into account, not just the legal and the contractual side, but really everything. And then, of course, there's the COVID-19 impacts. For example, when you look at a commercial energy efficiency program, for example, how does that impact our ability to deliver and to receive the capacity that we're really relying on to make sure that we can power the city of Glendale? And last but not least, financially, how does this impact the city? And what, if anything, does that do to our rate structure? What changes are needed? What do we need to focus on to make sure that we've really covered all our bases? This is something that we're looking at rolling out, potentially on a full-scale basis, and want to make sure that it's done right. So I just wanted to highlight really the excellent job, frankly, that GWP staff has done to try to wrap our heads around all of these issues and make sure that we've got it covered, but also to work on these innovative programs and make sure that we're bringing something that's really groundbreaking and exciting for this commission to consider. So with that, if we could go to the next slide, GWP is going to dive in and explain the specific programs that we're proposing.
And commissioners, I'll just interject before Craig gets going here. I think Christine hit on it, is being groundbreaking and innovative. In talking to some of our vendors, this is likely the largest project of its type, the most extensive project of its type currently in not only the state but the country. So we are really breaking new ground here, and it's exciting. And as I said, it's something we think is critical to having a well-rounded, diverse portfolio that is going to sustain us and sustain the environment for the future. So with that, I'll let Craig go forward on presentation. Craig, we can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted or...
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
This is Ron. I have a question. I mean, what is the life of thermal units?
The life of thermal units?
Yeah.
Well, normally the life from the manufacturer will be somewhere around 30 years.
So when we are saying that we are going to have 100%, clean energy 2030, now we are 2020. So we are buying something that the life is 30 years, but we are going to use for 10 years. How it works?
Right. So the 2030 plan is a concept, and when we study it and roll it out, the gas is still a viable option, even as a backup for reliability until 2045. So that'll all be factored into the study. Like I said, the study is an aggressive look at how we can accelerate our clean energy. And it may be that we are able to accomplish some of those goals of reducing or eliminating the thermal altogether. But again, that remains to be seen. Ultimately, we would love not to have to put any new gas. But again, as we balance sustainability with reliability and affordability, our three-legged stool that is the foundation of GWP, we got to look at everything. So, our hope is that we're able to find programs and assets that can help us in that regard. But that'll all be covered and included.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm off mute now. Sorry about that. My name is Craig Keenan. I'm Deputy General Manager on Business Services. First program we're going to talk about is Franklin Energy. This is a residential and commercial demand response program. The residential program will include individually metered small business customers. The commercial program will target larger customers greater than 50 kW demand, and it will include a demand reduction audit of the facility to evaluate how much demand response they can provide us. Customers are paid annual incentives for participation. The residential smart thermostat program, customers sign up in two different ways. You can have an existing thermostat that's compatible with the program and sign up, and we'll give you a $50 incentive for signing up. Or you can go to our store that we're going to have, online store, and get $100 rebate towards a new thermostat. You can install that thermostat yourself, or Franklin will send someone out to install it for you. We go to the next slide. So it's a 4-year program, January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2024. The demand response season will be 5 months, June through October. The amount of hours of events, maximum is 60 hours per year, up to 15 events. Events could last up to 4 hours. The residential program is an automated type program where we control the thermostat. Thermostats can be then adjusted 4 degrees from the set point. So if you had your thermostat at 74, they would adjust it up to 78 during the event. You'd be notified at least 8 hours before an event. Typically, it would be 8 p.m. the night before an event, you would get notification. The commercial program would be both auto and manual options. Commercial customers with an EMS system, an energy management system, would be signed up, and we would do that automatically. Those that do not, there would be manual options. We would provide them notice of the event, and then during the time they'd go around and turn things on and or off to achieve the demand reduction. The next program is a straightforward commercial energy efficiency program. It's direct install of energy efficient lighting, heating and air conditioning type improvements. Commercial customers whose demand are no greater than 150 kW per meter would be able to participate. Lime Energy would do a energy efficient assessment of the facilities. They develop proposals. They would do the install for subcontractors and report the energy savings. We would pay a fixed rate per kilowatt hour saved. It's a 7-year implementation, January 1 to December 31st, 2027. The measures are expected to last between 10 and 15 years. That's an overview of both of these programs. The next program is Sunrun, and I'll turn it over to Mark Young.
Mark Young, Deputy General Manager of Power Management. I'm here to talk to you about Sunrun. Sunrun and Glendale are working together to try to incorporate what we call a virtual power plant. And just to give you a little definition of what I think of a personal power plant, it's a network of decentralized power generating units, i.e. rooftop solar systems, combined with the solar storage system, which is the battery or the BESS system that's going to be attached to each facility. They can be dispatched through a central control system. That central control system will enable all the solar projects and the battery to act as one project. So instead of having individual kilowatts, you'll have megawatts, and you'll be able to effectively do things like load shift, which is very vital to us since we're trying to reduce our dependency on thermal generation during peak conditions. This project was going to include 3,000 single-family residents and 30 to 40 multifamily residences that should come up to a virtual power plant capacity of 25.5 megawatts of battery and up to 28 megawatts of solar generation. The battery it's really a 50 megawatt hour battery, but with the inverters are 2-hour batteries, so it limits the output of the battery to 25.5. To give you a little bit of better understanding of how this works, and the concept of load shifting, I'd like to go to the next slide, please.
Kathleen, the next slide. Oh, there.
Yes, thank you. So the dash line is our peak hourly load last in 2017 when we hit a 346 megawatt peak. The blue bars are what the virtual power plant would do. So the blue bars are showing me that solar is going to be produced, and since it's a negative bar, it would be charging the battery. And once the battery is full, it would be charging many batteries, but in the virtual power plant concept, I'm thinking of it as one battery. It's charging the battery to be full, and that would provide me with 50.5 megawatts. Once the battery is full, then the solar will start to be used for load. When we get towards the peak, as you can see in the red bars, we would be starting to discharge our battery, and as we discharge our battery, you can see that the dashed line on load would go down, effectively load shifting and reducing our peak demand from about 346 to about 300 megawatts. So this is vital for us because we're looking at a power production capability of being able to meet our peak load. And you can see here the peak load happens between 15 and 1,600 hours. So I'm sure there's a lot of questions of virtual power plants. I think the concept it's an easy concept. The design of this program took Sunrun and Glendale an awful long time because most of the programs were very small in nature. So Cal Edison is doing a program of 30 houses. We're doing a program of 3,000 to 4,000 houses with 15 to 30 multifamily residences. So you can see that the enormity of this program is quite large, like Mr. Zern said. It is the largest in the country and could conceivably be the largest in the world. And when you consider the size of this program based on the actual load of Glendale, you can see that it's playing a huge, significant role in meeting our demand. So I think I'm done with talking about virtual power plant. If you have any questions, you could talk to me about them, although if you wanted to wait, that's also good. I just think that the concept is a little complicated, so I take this moment and be open to any questions if you have any.
Yeah, this is Rada Vanessian. I have a question. So this concept, of course, it is excellent. But I was thinking that at each facility, for sure there would be hardware to be added, and generally there would be a sophisticated software. So who's going to pay for that?
So the software is under contract with Sunrun, and then we will provide them with signals on when to discharge the battery and at what level. And that software will then integrate a signal to each one of these batteries, and it will discharge as if it was one battery.
So who's going to pay for that? I mean, it's a facility, big facility, has got a rooftop photovoltaic system, and the hardware should be added to kind of facilitate that virtual power plant. So my question is, the utility is paying for that, or that owner is going to pay for that?
No, you'll see in the next slide, it'll talk about what the benefits to the customer, to Sunrun, and to the utility are. But generally speaking, it's not going to be a cost to the person who's hosting this on their facility. This will be absorbed, the cost of the hardware will be absorbed by Sunrun, and we will be paying Sunrun a fee for the solar and the capacity charge of the battery.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question, Mark. This is Ted Flanagan, and this makes me proud of being a resident of Glendale, that we are considering rolling out this Sunrun program and this virtual power plant, which is a very, very progressive thing. It's been before, but this is very progressive, and as we heard from Craig and Steve, we're doing it in numbers that haven't been done before. So 3 cheers to the team for bringing this one to the fore. I just had a couple minor questions about the virtual power plant. And one is, who will be eligible? I mean, I'm in the solar business. You know, we don't like to put solar systems on rooftops that are in bad condition. Solar companies typically like to work with larger rooftops that have unimpeded shading. So is there, in the Sunrun contract, are there any sort of provisions that Sunrun has to offer this to everybody, or can they sort of screen out homes that they don't want to serve?
So the contract between the customer and Sunrun is between the customer and Sunrun. However, what we've done is we've ensured that Sunrun didn't decide to place 50 megawatts of virtual power plant on multi-family residences. We forced them to put these programs on 3,000 to 4,000 single-family residences, but we haven't determined, or we haven't stipulated which 3,000 residences that they could use. So
Right.
I'm sure that if there's shading conditions or things like that, they'd be less desirable. But we have performance guarantees on these contracts, and they're not going to be able to be as selective as you might think they would because of the enormity of the program.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for that. And I have one other question is, does each participant need to take solar and storage, or could they take one or the other, or is that an option? Is a battery alone scenario plausible in an area that's got shade, for example, and you can't really do solar?
So presently, the program is solar and battery, and one of the large benefits to the customer is that they have reserve power in the event of blackout. The concept of load shifting is vital. We were looking at potentially putting batteries on existing solar facilities, but we haven't implemented that yet. That would be something that we might do later on down the line. But keep in mind that I have solar on my house. It just doesn't pay for me to put battery on my house because I have a battery. It's called Southern California Edison. And when I put my solar panels on my system, I made sure that I stayed in Tier 1 at Edison. So if you have a battery, you can make it so that you're net zero. But people that have solar on their houses typically didn't make their bill zero. They made it into the cheapest possible based on the price of the solar panels at the time.
Okay, well, thank you for the answers to those questions. And again, I'm very impressed that we are moving into this new utility reality. I presume, and I'm happy to hear you speak, Mark, about perhaps in the next phase, because I think there's a lot more opportunity, and I'll get into some of the broader questions later, but obviously lots more opportunity working with larger customers as well for this virtual power plant. But thank you very much.
You know, one of the things that you brought up is that there is phases. What we were looking at is and again, we weren't supposed to be talking about the repower, but we were looking at being able to offset some of the repowering thermal generation migration with guaranteed resources. When we asked for guarantees and liquidated damage concepts, people were a little bit nervous about that. And what we needed guaranteed megawatts out of these programs. Once these programs are in effect, then we can go ahead and look at, I don't want to say more exotic or more challenging type of concept for us to be able to extract more benefit from the thermal component locally than what we have now. But we needed to make sure that we were going to be guaranteed these numbers in order for us to move forward with all the projects we're trying to do all at once.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I applaud the notion of phases. Obviously, the large commercial sector is available to you, to us as we go forward, and then I'm concerned about this big EV load hitting our system, and so, you know, whether we might have demand response programs to address the electric vehicle loads as well, all to flatten that load profile for the city. But thank you for the responses.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Jasmadarian, I wanted to give you an opportunity if you had any questions you wanted to ask.
No, he answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young, I do have one question. With regards to this 3,000 or 4,000 rooftop solars and batteries that Sunrun is going to be installing, are we getting some sort of an equal distribution so that not all the load is in North Glendale or South Glendale? I'm thinking about transmission issues and you know, when we need the power back from this 3,000 or 4,000 installations, is it all going to come from North Glendale or South Glendale? Or is it going to be coming in equally so that our transmission system is going to be able to support this? Is that something that you guys looked into at the same time?
Yes, sir. We definitely looked at the concept of stacking feeders and loading feeders and having it adversely affect the distribution system, and we're not looking to do that. We're going to be working with Sunrun in order for them to diversify their installation to make sure that not one feeder is going to be overloaded. I can't tell you exactly which feeders they're going to be, but they will be working with distribution engineers to make sure that the effects of their work would be minimized and work in relation to the upgrades in the distribution system.
Add to that, with that said, our engineers have done a preliminary look at this, and there is no question that we're going to need to do some work on the distribution system. Regardless of where the concentrations are, there are some areas that we're going to need to do some upgrades on. To what extent, and I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but to what extent those upgrades are going to are going to require, it remains to be seen. However, we have a active request for proposal out now, and it's a two-pronged approach. It's the main component of the RFP is to identify city-owned property that is potential for the development of renewable or clean energy facilities. We think this might be the biggest boost to any type of what you might call commercial virtual power plants, is to start with our own property and look at what we can do to develop it, from the parking structures to the flat lots to water reservoirs to landfill. We're going to look at everything that was within our control as a way to make it that much easier. What we found is in the commercial sector, it's a little difficult to get buy-in from some of those folks. We recently did a commercial survey where we went out and asked our largest users, our 100 largest users is what we surveyed, about their desires, needs, and programs they would like to work with us on. We got 8 really good responses that we're following up individually with those firms. 8 doesn't sound like a lot, but you got to remember, you don't have, in the commercial business, 8 customers could make up, a lot more of what our load demand is than residential areas. So we're pretty excited about that. We're pretty excited about the opportunity to be able to develop our own properties. But in that RFP, the second prong is for us to do a deeper dive and analysis on what the impacts to the distribution system would be. As I think it was Mr. Flanagan said, this new norm in the energy provision industry, and we got to make the adoption. It's not the traditional method. So with power coming back into the system, and as Mark alluded to, our feeders and making sure that those are all up to speed. We anticipate there'll be some level of upgrades needed, and I think that's a positive thing. It just it'll take a little bit of time, and obviously it always takes a little bit of money, but we'll have a better handle on that once we get our analysis done.
Okay. Let's continue, I guess.
I think Mark was going to do the next slide as well.
I think it's Christine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll jump in here. So this is just a brief overview of the structure of how the virtual power plant agreements would work. We don't need to dwell on this too much unless this commission desires, but essentially we would have a contractual relationship with Sunrun where we have a power purchase agreement with them. We're purchasing the energy and we're purchasing the capacity from the solar systems and the batteries that are being fed from the solar system. So we're getting the renewable energy, we're getting the renewable energy credits, and we're getting the use of that dispatchable capacity that we can use to shift load, as Mr. Young was showing you, to when the solar drops off. The customer is going to have a relationship, and I'll call it like a lease agreement with Sunrun, because they're going to allow the use of their roof space and, their garage or wherever the battery would be housed to be stored there. And in exchange for that, the customer would get some backup power from the battery in the event there's a grid outage. So that's a benefit to the customer. In addition to that, to entice customers to participate in this program, the customer would receive, as proposed by Sunrun, a monthly incentive from GWP to compensate them for their willingness to participate in this program. So the way it works is that all of the power from the solar panels gets fed onto the grid. It's not being used by the property except to the extent that there's a use of the battery for backup during outages. But so as compensation to the customers to participate, they do receive a monthly incentive and, of course, the backup power. So next slide, please. So what are we getting for what amount of megawatts or capacity are we getting is the question, and I think it's Mark Young that was going to handle this one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this is kind of the summary of what the peak capacity benefit to the city is, and just to make it clear what peak capacity is, in the wholesale marketing, there's peak and on-peak. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the highest load for the day, and we usually look at that in a 2 or a 4 hour period. And in this case, we're looking at it in a 2 hour period. So in this program, how many megawatts can we reduce our load for those hours of the day that are the most demand in load? And Franklin has about 7 megawatts. They have the program is a 10 megawatt program, and the average is 7. Lime is about 6.2, and Sunrun, since we're not sure of where the peak is going to be, because we anticipate as electric vehicle penetration starts to get a little bit further down the line, it will shift the peak from 6 o'clock at night to maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. When that's the case, then the solar of the virtual power plant won't be producing, and we'll only be able to rely on 25.25 megawatts for 2 hours. So you can see with these 3 programs, maximum peak reduction we can have is about 38 megawatts. You can see that's pretty substantial for a utility our size.
Introduce Tony Georges. And Tony is with the company NewGen. He has been our cost of service analysis guru. Some of you who have been on the commission may recall Tony presented the 2018 cost of service analysis and the rate schedule that we went forward with. And obviously, as we get into now the costs of the programs, how does that fit into the existing cost of service analysis? And then from there, what are potential impacts on the rates? So with that, I just wanted to give Tony an introduction and let him go forward.
Thanks, Steve. I think, Greg,
Actually, Steve,
yeah.
this is Craig. I'll do this slide, and then it goes to Tony.
I jumped the gun. Sorry about that. So, but y'all know who Tony is now, so we can.
So this is Craig Keenan again. I just want to summarize what we're calling the total cost for each of these programs. We're looking at the 3 different vendors plus the COSA analysis. We're looking at contract terms, the contract costs, customer payments that Christine had mentioned, estimates of our internal labor, marketing, and integration costs, and then the total cost. Now, these are over the whole life of each contract. So for Franklin Energy, we're looking at a total cost over 4 years of about $7.8 million. Lime, it's about $19.1 million. In Sunrun, over 25 years, we're looking at about $243 million. In a COSA analysis, the cost of service analysis is about $150,000. The total for all of this is about $270 million over 25 years. So that's that summary.
So I had a question, Mr. Keenan. This 243 million, that's pretty much 25 megawatts every year for the next 25 years. Is that correct?
The peak, yes.
Yeah.
25, right, the peak that Mark just talked about, yes.
So it sounds like almost 10 million per year for the peak of 25 megawatts. Is that cost comparable with us buying power from Nevada or wherever else we end up buying power from?
That would be a question for Mark. First, I'd like to say these are just like these are the nominal dollars. These are not the actual costs that might impact rates, because things will be offset. Like you said, you'd save money on purchase power and things like that. This is just the gross numbers. Mark, if you want to take the question.
I think maybe the last solar storage project we did, which was the Eland 1 project, and that's imported. So that's a project that's out in the Mojave or Kern County. And that project came in I mean, if we did it on a cost per megawatt basis, I think Elin came in somewhere around $159,000 a megawatt. The Sunrun, I believe, and Craig can correct me if I'm wrong, is about $266,000 a megawatt. So it's quite a difference. And then just you know, as an equalizer, obviously the Sunrun doesn't have long distance transmission involved in it, and so factoring that part of it in, you're still looking at probably a $65,000 to $70,000 a megawatt difference between the last project we did, the newest project we did. It's a really inexpensive project, and it's the most comparable in relation to what you're asking, which was import versus local generation, if you will, on the VPP.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So we're going, if it's okay, we can go on to the next slide, and Tony Georges will take over.
Thanks, Craig. I'm Tony Georges. I'm with NewGen Strategies and Solutions. As Steve alluded to, we were the cost of service consultant a couple of years ago, presented to you guys in the council previously. I'm the managing director of our energy practice. I wanted to introduce this slide. Our work, Glendale had gotten in touch with us to evaluate from a financial standpoint the different clean energy options in comparison to where things are right now, the projections where things stand. So we evaluated essentially 5 options, a base case and 4 options. The base case from a technology standpoint is equivalent to the internal combustion engines and the battery. And if you are curious, the COSA acronym there is cost of service analysis. That process is simply just a financial and accounting exercise to calculate the total costs to operate the utility and deliver service to customers, and then the rates required to then recover those costs. But it's a financial and accounting exercise. We completed that a couple of years ago. What we did find in evaluating the options is that the currently planned for rate changes, or in the original ones that were presented in 2018, those are adequately funding the base case, are adequately funding the internal combustion engines and the battery. So no additional rate changes would be necessary to remain in alignment with the projections that we had made previously. Option 1 is adding Sunrun to that base case, as has been explained. Option 2 would be adding the Line Energy Efficiency Program to the base case. So we looked at each of these individually. Option 3 being Franklin demand response. And then we looked on option 4, we looked at combining all 3 clean energy options with the planned internal combustion engines and battery. And that results in option 4. I would note that in that last bullet there, as we were analyzing each of the clean energy plans, as been seen earlier, while these plans have anywhere from, I think, a 5 to 7 year life up to a close to maybe 20 year life, we looked at a snapshot as the clean energy programs achieved quote unquote full levels or full sustained levels of adoption and or implementation. So we looked at a snapshot of costs and years, and that's from 2022 to 2025 in our financial model to evaluate the impacts that each option would have. So next slide, please. So in evaluating that 2022 to 2025 timeframe, these are the resulting singular impacts from each of the clean energy plans. The base case is not in here, as I mentioned, because it is equivalent or it is adequately funded and aligns with the prior approved 0.5% 111 rate increases, even with the delay of I believe this year to next of the 1% increase, if I remember that correctly.
Yeah.
You'll see that option 1 there is adding Sunrun, and what this graph is showing you is the difference from the base case in dollars on the left axis there, the left vertical axis, and then on the right vertical axis, that dollar amount is equated to a overall effective rate impact on the system. What we did compare is what we call a revenue requirement. So this is all the total costs to run the utility at the base case level, and then what are the total costs on an annual basis for each of these 4 options. As I mentioned, option 1 was a $6.7 million a year increase to currently planned rates. That is equivalent to a 2.9% one-time rate increase. So to remain at the same point as you are currently with the projections, you would implement an almost 3% rate increase, and that you would remain at the same point financially as what we expected. Option 2 is adding line. That's the energy efficiency program. That adds 1% or $2.2 million in costs. Option 3 is Franklin demand response. That is just over 0.5%, 0.6%, 1.4 million. And then finally, option 4 is adding all three of those together. Summing those together, you get a 4.5% rate increase with a $10.3 million a year impact. As I'm explaining the dollar impacts, those would be on an annual basis. So it's not as though as if you funded something for $10.3 million this year that takes care of the rate changes or the cost impacts in subsequent years. That would be $10.3 million every year for the life of the programs, as long as they're in place. If you were to implement a rate increase along with this, if you implemented that rate increase essentially when you implement the programs, so for example, for option 4, you would implement the 4.5% immediately, and that would fund that $10.3 million for the life of that program. So I did want to drop that delineation between these dollar impacts. These aren't a one-time hit. These are annual cost increases to the current state of Glendale's financials and rates.
And Tony, if I can, just I wanted to point out, and please correct me if I'm wrong, these are net costs. We had our consultant, Ascend Analytics, run these programs through our model, so you've got the technical review of it. So these are net costs. So anything that these programs, by implementing these programs, they would reduce or eliminate other costs that I would say replace other costs. That's been factored in here. So this is net. So we've already looked at, whether it's fuel savings or maintenance savings or any of those other savings that were already included in our budget. We backed those out and made it a net cost. So I know sometimes folks will go, how did you factor that? Well, if you add Sunrun, you're not going to have to do this on that you've been doing previously. We factored that in.
Correct. That is a net impact, and it was very important to have Ascend run those modeling efforts, simply because these are very complicated. I think as Mark alluded to, there's a number of moving pieces. So whether you're purchasing more or less fuel, whether you're purchasing more energy in the market or less, operational O&M, operation and maintenance savings, as Steve mentioned. So those Ascend runs were critical in calculating these costs.
So Tony, just so that I am clear, for example, if we're saying there's going to be a 4.5% increase, that's a one-time increase. So let's say in 2022, we say we increase it 4.5%. 2023, we're not increasing another 4.5%, correct? It's just...
Correct. It would be, I'll say this, so if you did it, if you did a rate increase aligned with when you start incurring these costs, it would be a one-time rate increase of the numbers that are shown there.
Right.
If it were to be delayed, what happens is these things compound themselves, and so if you were to delay a rate increase associated with the added costs, you would then need to increase that rate increase by marginal amounts the number of years that you delay.
Right.
So because the amount that you're losing is obviously accruing over time.
Okay.
And certainly that's just applicable to these programs. There may be other facets of the utility that may require a rate increase. Just so, I wanted to be clear that that's just addressing these particular programs. We have a lot of things, as you well know, that we have to balance, whether it's labor, benefits, retirement, and just increasing operational costs. So this would be just specific to these programs, either individually or any combination of up to all three of them.
Oh, go ahead, Nina.
Have you looked at any grants, federal grants, anything like that might help offset some of these costs? I mean, the economy is, people are really hurting right now, and I like clean energy, don't get me wrong on that, but I'm just thinking about the impact to the ratepayers.
answer to the question would be that the developers themselves may, in some cases, be taking advantage of subsidies, and our intent in negotiating was to try to get the lowest possible price for us and subsequently for the ratepayers. I think as we segue into the next slide, though, Nina, you're going to see some challenges we're facing right along the lines of what you indicated, and that may open up discussion and thought on maybe a couple different options to pursue, or possibly that we could pursue. So maybe we'll just roll into that next slide. Unless you have any more questions of Tony on this particular slide.
I just have a question, Tony, nicely presented, by the way. I guess most of the discussion has been focused on the peak capacity and the ability of these programs to trim peak capacity, which is critical. And I'm sure you factored in all of the value of the solar that the Sunrun, the virtual power plant, will generate, and the utility can resell. But is it fair to say that for about a 4.5% rate increase, that we have cut or have the ability to cut our peak load by about 10%?
I'll defer to Mark, I think, on that one. These are a mix of programs. They do each, in their own way, contribute to peak demand. I think Franklin and Sunrun more so than Lime. I think Lime's a smaller contributor there, but I think that's a fair equivalent, but I'll leave that to Mark.
Okay, thank you.
This is Mark. I'm not sure of the exact percentage of the rate of the peak decrease, but you do have to remember that the solar is being produced at we're paying for solar during the middle of the day when the duck curve is at its lowest. So as the duck curve gets worse and worse, it will be worse and worse. So we'll be paying a very high price for that solar production in an over-generation time, which will make generation at that time worse. That's why as an EIM market, that's why the duck curve goes negative on the back of the duck, and you'll see that the head of the duck gets worse and worse as the RPS requirements on all the utilities start to get more strict.
Mark,
Thank you.
Mark, I had a question about the use that we can get out of the Sunrun generation capability. So it's wonderful that we're able to do it to reduce our peak. Could we also do it to, when necessary, to reduce our cost of purchasing power? I mean, we're paying this, it's available, it's there. If we not using it for peak, could we use it at other time where purchasing power from outside or importing is more expensive?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was not clear in that. We're going to get 100% of the solar output of this virtual power plant, and we'll be using it to load. When we put it through the Ascend model, the model saw that this was a generator that we were using, and then it would either sell any excess or purchase less generation on a stochastic model production, and that's how we came up with the numbers. So Tony's numbers were based on a model run through Ascend, and Ascend took all the megawatts that were being produced in the solar into consideration.
Okay. All right.
So here we are. This is all really good stuff. No question about it. And as I said at the beginning, this is what I believe is an integral component of a well assembled, compiled, and diverse portfolio. But what's the old saying? Timing is everything. And so while Tony, based on what his charge was from us, used the base case 2018 COSA for coming up with those financial results that he just presented to you. The problem is that we have entered an unprecedented time. We've never been in a situation like we are in, and it has definitely had impacts on all of us. It's had personal impacts, it's had It's had work-related impacts, and it's had impacts on the utility, and certainly it has had impacts on our customers. However, this is a challenge. This is just simply a challenge, not a barrier. Believe me, we're gonna work our way through it. It just is. There's some things that we need to take a look at that may give us a little bit different, a couple different options on our approach. So the bottom line is, and really, we need to do a new COSA. And the reason for that is that the COVID-19 related impacts have definitely changed the model. The COSA, as Tony described it, is our foundational document for our foundational financial document for how we operate in GWP. Believe me, you can ask my staff. We beat this home. Every single expenditure, every program, any alternate revisions or alterations to programs, all have to feed back into that COSA, and it has to be consistent with what we projected for that 5-year period. Obviously, you have emergencies and you have unforeseen circumstances. We've got reserves that are set aside for that. But for a day in, a day out operation, we stick to that COSA. It is our Bible, our roadmap for that 5-year period. And the roadmap we have now, I don't believe is accurate. And it's not accurate because of the impacts of COVID. Primarily, our sales are down. And this is not something we're projecting. It's something that's happening. I will give you an idea of the largest customers in Glendale on average, and we have, I think, 15 or 12. The overall average is 18% below last year. And I can tell you the largest of those, now that's the average. So that includes the hospitals. And obviously the hospitals have been running pretty much full tilt, if not more. Now their numbers are in some cases still down a little, but not nearly like the others. If you look at the rest of our customers, and we'll go from the Walt Disney Company to the Glendale Galleria, you're looking at 23 to 46% down from what their normal purchase is. That obviously affects revenue greatly. The other thing related to that is on the commercial sector, we have a demand charge. The demand charge is set based on the previous year's actuals for any particular commercial customer. So obviously those demand charges are all going to have to be reset. They were set in the COSA thinking, and we're always very, very conservative in how we project our increases, and we've got even conservation factored in, but generally our projections on revenue are pretty flat, pretty darn flat. But we've definitely been hit by this. And so that reduced demand charge is going to subsequently lower our revenue as well. It'll have it, and then it has an impact throughout the organization. So it'll have cash reserve impact. We did a rate deferral, which I think absolutely we should have done. However, it has an impact. Good, bad, or indifferent, these programs, as necessary as they might be, are going to have an impact. And as you all are well aware, GWP is a business entity. This is it. This is how we operate. This is our revenue. We don't get revenue from anywhere else. We don't get sales tax. We don't get property tax. The general fund doesn't give us money. Quite the contrary, we give the general fund money. So that has an impact on us as well. We put in a number of rate assistance programs. Absolutely, we should have done that. There was no question, no hesitation that was what we should do. We needed to help our customers during these trying times. However, that money also comes out of our budget, and so, especially in this particular case, the public benefit charge budget, which could very well be used to help with the clean energy programs. And then we've got the weather that we're concerned about. The weather has, as you know, and as I alluded to earlier, continues to get bad. We believe that there are going to be capital infrastructure upgrades that are going to be necessary. I will tell you one, and when I say weather, it's really weather and wildfire related. One of them is our wildfire mitigation plan, and what we are going to be going to become compliant with that plan, which is a lot of upgrades to the infrastructure, putting in protected wire, putting in terminating connections, and new transformers, all in an effort to mitigate the potential for a down power line or some malfunction of the distribution system to cause a wildfire, to cause a fire. We also have just seen, based on how the city's laid out, obviously the substations are all pretty old. And when I say that, the old in where they were situated, we've upgraded 2 of our substations substantially, and that's helped tremendously. But we're beginning to believe, and I believe that I think an additional substation would be a really good thing for us to have, especially deep in the commercial sector. And so that's something we're looking at. I bring it up only because that's another capital charge. And as you may recall, we went to what's called a pay-go capital system. So we wanted to move away from the constant or consistent issuing of debt, bonds, to fund capital projects, and instead built it into the rates, part of our reserves, and we have the pay-go capital. So we're trying to not charge, if you will, our capital programs, but pay cash for them. So these additional programs are gonna cost more, and they're gonna push that pay-go capital reserve number as well. So all of that said, as I mentioned, it's a challenge. It's not a barrier. But for us to provide, certainly the city council, you as well, the citizens of Glendale, an informed basis in which to make decisions, I think we're going to need to really vet this COSA and go back through it and find out where we're at based on the situation that we have faced since March, and which we will likely continue into at least this time next year, if not a little bit longer. I hope it doesn't last that long, but I think most of the folks who are considered to be experts are pegging, 2022 is when we start to emerge out of this. So with that said, what are some other options? Because one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to lose the momentum we have going. I mean, I think our momentum here has been great. The COSA, and Tony could speak specifically, will take a little bit of time to develop. In the meantime, I think that there's an option available to us to put these programs into practice right now on a pilot basis to get them going. There's a couple of other things that as well, and I mentioned the infrastructure upgrades that are going to be required. We also have, and you saw in one of Craig's presentations, he had staffing levels. We absolutely know, based on our experience of what it takes to assist people in putting a solar system on their house. We know what it takes now. If you were to, extrapolate that out based on the numbers that we're seeing here, it's going to be a pretty big impact to staff, not just Glendale Water and Power, but the Building and Safety Department as well. So we had a pretty sizable number in there that we're looking at for, even if it was short term during the implementation period, of having to have either contract staff or additional staff added to assist us with it. The engineering folks still feel that they may need some full-time staff to manage the program for the long term. So a pilot program could potentially give you a better look at exactly what is involved. So I don't know what that would consist of. Maybe it's a third, maybe it's a quarter of what the full program build out is. But you go in and you get a chance to get people's feet wet. You get a chance to see how the residents react to it. You get to see how, I think Mr. Flanagan mentioned, or Mr. Kadikian mentioned, where everything's located and how it impacts if you're loaded in one area over another, how to manage the contract. And I think primarily, I'm talking about the Sunrun, but it gives you an opportunity to see what will be the true impacts, how easy is this to roll out, what do we need to do to adjust when we do go to full rollout. So those are all just things to consider. At the end of the day, my guess is that with our revenue down, it is going to have an impact on where we are. Will it affect those rate estimates that Tony gave? It's possible. It's possible. Could go either way, but it's possible that those rates could be impacted by what a new COSA shows. So that's just something to consider. It's an option. It allows us to definitely move forward and to get this thing off the ground and really start looking at how we want to do it and the benefits of it, while at the same time making sure we've got the financial situation well in hand, that we know fully well what we're getting into and what it's gonna require. And then, you know, options on maybe what funding sources we can use within GWP. And you know, you have the program considerations, the benefits, clean, non-fossil fuel, local generation, beautiful. Involves community in the solution. Our citizens and our customers are helping us help them. It provides benefits to the customers as the team has gone through. It's local jobs. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's going to take folks to do the installations on that. We may end up hiring more people to help us manage the programs. That's more jobs available for folks. Some of the challenges is the reliability and the baseload generation that we still need. The distribution system impacts that I talked about earlier, and it does require study, but we're underway with that. At this point, we didn't initially have a pilot phase, but you know, that's an opportunity for us to consider maybe just adding a phase to the phased-in approach, and it being an initial phase that allows us to step back on the finances and make sure we're okay. And then, of course, the cost and rate impacts in the new COSA that I think is really important for us to do. But we've got a really good program here. I think you heard the team, you know, say that it has the potential to have significant impact on our load in a good way. And as I said, we don't want to lose the momentum, and we don't want to stop. But we do need to do a couple more things. This, as I said again, an unprecedented phase of you know, that we're in. It's also a new program, very new. There aren't a lot of others, as you heard Mark talk about, that have done it for us to bounce off. I think even the Sunrun folks would say this is a whole new dynamic for them, and maybe even causes them to change their business model based on what they're finding through our negotiations. And that may be a really good thing too for everyone. So all a really, really good, positive outcome. It just may be because of the situation we're in today, we ease in a little bit slower than we had proposed, but we go forward nonetheless. And then the next steps are just pretty basic. So, you know, we're here today to talk to you about it, and then we have a scheduled October 13th presentation to the council, and then depending on what the council ultimately decides, we go from there on implementation. So that's our presentation. We appreciate your patience, and we're available to answer any questions you have.
Okay, so let me set up the questioning so that not everybody's talking on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is we'll start with the commissioners in alphabetical order, and then we're going to cycle back because some questions might come back, so we're going to come back. And so let's start with Commissioner Avanesian, if you have any questions with regards to the presentation. You're muted, Commissioner Avanesian. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking, generally speaking, how much rooftops or other, square feet we have available in Glendale. Did this guys calculated that?
Mark, you want to?
Yes, this is Mark. There's 33,000 homes, so it's really hard to figure out what the square footage is. But originally, when the thought process was to put solar on everybody's houses and they would meet Glendale load, we realized that that wasn't the case. So I think 3,000 homes that are optimal, or 3,000 or 4,000 homes that are optimal for this program is extremely aggressive.
And Mark, just to add to that, and that was Sunrun's feeling too. So that's not a constraint we put on them. The only constraint we had is make sure it's reasonable, make sure it's doable, because we want to, to the best of our ability, hang our hat on this. So don't give us a pie in the sky and we end up being disappointed or making decisions, long-term decisions based on something that doesn't come to fruition. They took that to heart and came back with this proposal.
And and yes, sir, that's an important part about this is when we went to negotiate with them originally, they offered X amount of benefit. And we asked them if they can escalate it and they can make it larger. The three companies that we're still in negotiations with attempted to give their best guess and back up their guess. Like Mr. Zern said, we didn't want somebody to say that they can come in and give us 50 and then only give us 5. So we wanted to make sure that they can give us as much as that they can give us, and we were going to hold them responsible for actually performance.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner Avanesian. Ms. Godinez, I have a question for you with regards to procedure. I have somebody online would like to comment. Are the comments taken before our questions or after our questions? What's the proper procedure?
Proceed in either way. May I suggest you perhaps have your questions answered and then you turn it over to public comments, and then you could go back to commissioner comments, and then we can go through some options for you to make your motion. Okay,
so let the commissioners ask first set of questions, allow the public to ask, and then come back with final questions.
Yes, exactly. Questions and comments you could come back with before the motion.
All right, Ms. Pinkerton, I see you on line 1. We will get to you after this order that I just said. Thank you. All right, Commissioner Avanesian, back to you if you have any further questions.
I was thinking that the bottom line is these companies are going to sell power to Glendale Water and Power. So what is the cent per watt of the power that they're going to sell us?
I don't know that we boiled it down to a cost per watt. Craig, did you get that far? We were having, it was a difficult task to try to equate everything to a megawatt, because some of the smaller programs, which aren't actually energy providing programs, but energy saving programs. So we had to kind of try to get as much apples to apples as we could. But I don't know that the financial team boiled it down to that level, or if that's something easy for us to do. I don't know. Craig, do you have a comment?
I do have numbers for the line program because it's pretty straightforward. We're paying over the life of the measures. It starts out at 48 cents for the first year kilowatt hour to 60 cents over the life of the measures. That's about 3.8 cents starting out the first year per kilowatt hour, up to 4.8 cents in the year for the last tranche of savings. So it's between 3.8 cents and 4.8 cents, which is a good number. The Franklin program does not really provide kilowatt hours or megawatt hours. It's just a demand reduction, very little kilowatt hours. And Sunrun, I thought we might have done a calculation on that. Let me go through this real quick, man.
There's another question. We can answer it while Craig looks that up.
Well, what we had here is about an earlier estimate, and this does not include Tony's analysis, was about $167 a megawatt hour for Sunrun.
Commissioner Avanesian, did you have any follow-up questions or request other information?
No, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Let's move to Commissioner Flanagan. Commissioner, if you have any questions, please.
A few questions. Thank you very much, Chairman. I appreciate that. And without being specific about any of the original 15 proposals, I'm just curious, was there an analysis of Scott. I know there could be room for double counting, so you probably have to back that out. But, you know, notwithstanding the very important points that Steve made about costs, what did that clean energy RFP reveal in terms of our potential in the city if cost wasn't an issue and we just wanted to go for it? And in subsequent phases, we wanted to go for it. How many megawatts did we have bid in?
Well, I think, and I'll let Mark or Christine talk a little bit more detail, but Mr. Flanagan, I think the idea was we didn't eliminate based on cost alone.
Yeah.
So if it was a viable program that we felt was achievable, even if it had a high price, we would have continued talking to that firm. What we found is a lot of people proposed things that were either not viable, they proposed partial programs. In other words, we can get you X amount of renewable energy at this point in the United States somewhere, the Western United States. And then we said, and how does that get to Glendale? And they said, well, that's up to you. So that wasn't doable. I mean, we wanted you to come with a full package so that whatever it was you were proposing would be delivered to Airway. That was our condition. So although we could give you what was proposed in the number, and I don't know it offhand, the feasibility, the viability, or even just in some cases impossible to achieve it. And we had everything from some R&D programs that proposers had said, boy, we'd love for you guys to be the incubator for us to be able to help develop the program, and you guys can pick up the tab. And we said, we're not that. That's not where we're at. We're at getting the biggest bang for our buck in clean or green energy. So I don't know, Mark, if you've got anything to add to that, but we looked at programs that were viable, that were proven, that were where we could look at cost impacts later, but we would negotiate on those. And even though that this is a program in size that's unprecedented, the technology is there. We know the technology is worked in different scales. So that's kind of where we were at with the total program.
Well, let me reframe thank you, Steve. Let me reframe the question. I mean, how many megawatts of viable programs can we look forward to? In say subsequent phases, do we have? I'm sure these aren't the only 3 viable programs.
Well, for us at this time, that's what we felt. These were the three programs, and we originally had 4, and then we eliminated 1, but this was the 3 that we felt. Now, subsequent phases. So, for instance, our RFP that's out now to develop a city-owned property, that's a subsequent phase. Our pursuit of commercial through this first aspect of it, where we'll deal with these 8 firms and see what we can come up with in enticing them. We also have on deck, if you will, for the baseball fans, an RFP for strictly commercial rooftop development. So we want to look at, and this is really kind of more not just the development, but also the sales. We have a sales pitch where we're out there talking to the owners of the buildings who may not be as motivated to put some of these installations in if they're renting the building. They don't get the direct benefit of the electrical savings, and they have to foot the cost of potentially upgrading their facility in order to handle it. We want to go out there and talk to them about it, tell them what it means to do this, maybe look at opportunities for us to partner with them so that some of that cost that they would not have to bore that by themselves. So those are subsequent phases, and I'm pretty confident that we're going to see those areas developed out. How much total megawatts that? I don't know at this point, but I think there's a tremendous amount of potential.
That's good to hear, and I'm very pleased to hear that you're focused on large commercial, because those of us who've been in this business forever, like you, Steve, and I, we know that we get the biggest bang for the buck out of the large commercial sector. So it seems as though this first phase is leaving the large commercial sector out, and that's okay. I mean, like you said, we got to start somewhere, get momentum, move things forward. But certainly, large commercial should be clearly in our sights. And I think things like uncapping the amount of distributed generation on a large commercial site, as we need that renewable capacity in our city and renewable energy in our portfolio. Perhaps uncapping the energy efficiency incentives that go to a single customer in a year, so that we can really reap those most cost-effective savings. we spent the last part of the presentation was about rate impacts, which is my least favorite subject. It has retarded the development of energy efficiency and renewable energy since I've been in this. I've been doing this for 35 years. And rate impacts don't just slow things down, they shut things down. And we really need to take a much more broader societal view of cost effectiveness in order to be a really responsible utility going forward. I had a question. Oh, did you want to respond?
I was going to say, those are excellent points, and we agree. We didn't think we were going to get, that this was going to be the one-time shot and solve all of our problems. We learned a lot from the process of, you know what? We think, for instance, developing our own properties is going to be better for us and better for the community, and an opportunity to maximize the potential. We want to look at commercial, but we need to take a little different approach. We need to make the commercial building folks want to do this. You're right. Rate impacts can sometimes make these programs DOA. And that's a very unfortunate thing. But that's another component that I didn't mention is, and in our briefings with council as we went through the review process, the comment about taking this out to the public, we can explain the benefits of the programs. And it's not, I get it. There are people who, it doesn't matter what the program does, they're living an existence that's very, very, very meager. And so any kind of an increase is going to affect them. But, again, is there ways for us to offset that for some of our customers that are most in need, and help them so that they see, well, you're going to get a benefit, the whole city is going to get a benefit. It is going to cost us a little bit more, but we'll try to keep those costs to a minimum and then offer other incentives and assistance where we can. So all of it comes together. It's not, as we've learned, it isn't just a matter of settling on a couple programs, slapping them down, putting them in, and walking away. We're in this. This is a daily deal for us.
Right.
All of us, the rest of us.
I'm glad to hear you. I'm glad to hear you say that. I like it, and I applaud what you're doing. Thank you very much. I did just on the large commercial. I mentioned several things, but one is certainly demand response in the commercial sector, and I had a tremendous experience in San Francisco, bringing out that civic pride of large corporations, large leadership corporations in the city, who, when they really understood the strain that the utility system was under, were more than willing to supply capacity. We'd already gone into their buildings to determine firm service levels, so it didn't impact their operations adversely, but they were able to provide really critical capacity at a very reasonable cost to the utility.
That's an excellent point too, and one that I think really drove home with us based on the first heat wave we had, where the CAISO was in trouble. And the CAISO had 4,000 megawatt shortage during that day. What came back was, they at that point were panicking. They had to make phone calls. They called, Mobile, they called Tesla, and asked them, "Can you just lower your load?" And they did it. It wasn't a tremendously difficult thing. And I think if you get ahead of that and talk to businesses about a program or a plan, almost like an emergency response plan, and then they can do things at their business. They can shift to other duties that day. They can turn things off. We do it, when we get into a crunch, we start turning off some of our water pumping. It's not necessary. We don't need it. That's a savings that we can do internally. But you're absolutely right. I think enlisting their help, even if they don't want to put solar panels on their roof, to say, can we develop a plan that if we reach, 3 straight 100-degree days with 80-degree lows, that we can count on you to cut back your load, and that would be tremendous.
Yeah, it's a great programs, and if you send teams, like you said, get ahead of it. If you said you don't want to be making phone calls in an emergency, but if you establish programs and you enlist participants and you send engineers into their buildings to develop protocols for cutting load down to firm service levels, it can be very automated and extremely cost effective. Just a couple more things briefly. The COSA, the study, very important, I totally agree. Tony, how long does it take to do that if you got authorization? Is that 6 months or 8 months, or what is it?
From start to finish, including presentations and feedback from commissions and boards, I would say it's typically about a 6-month process, depending on how you can schedule those things. Full analytics is probably a 4 or 5 month process, but the scheduling of stakeholders is typically one that extends the process.
Gotcha. And then my last comment is just I applaud GWP for moving forward, hopefully moving forward with these really progressive programs. California is on fire right now, and whether or not you are a big believer in climate change or the climate the threat, or you don't believe it or not, but our state is on fire. Our fire season is getting longer. The heat waves are getting more intense. The fires are more ferocious and frequent, and that's just one of the effects of climate change that's affecting our state and our nation and obviously our world. So I come back to this notion of rate impacts, and I think about what really impacts our life, and that is if the utility grid goes down for a week or two. Pandemic affects our life. I mean, there's the rate impacts of moving to a sane energy and future, I believe, are smart investments, not costs to our society. Cost to our society is just running with the base case or running with business as usual. That will cost our society once all of the externalities of all the fires and all the calamities and all the health impacts of all of this stuff are internalized. The clean energy path may have a rate impact, but I believe it will have a much larger societal benefit that we'll look back and we'll realize, why on earth were we holding ourselves back with maximizing efficiency and demand response and smart energy management and renewables? We'll look back and say, why on earth were we doing that? Oh, because it had a rate impact while our society is on fire. So enough of me, but thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner Flanagan. And again, for the people online, please hold on. Do not hang up. Stay. We want to hear from you, and we will get back to you shortly. All right, next I'll give Commissioner Jasmadarian an opportunity to ask any questions you may have.
Is by investing in this instead of the traditional dirty energy, for lack of a better term, how much are we saving in carbon emissions, that type of thing? What's the calculation?
We didn't specifically calculate carbon savings. We actually it was in the model on carbon savings, but remember, we're working towards carbon free by 2045 or 2030 if possible. So we're looking at renewable assets. So these would be replacing renewable or clean assets presently.
We're replacing clean assets already with more clean assets? I'm sorry, I'm misunderstanding something here.
Our biggest problem is we have transmission constraint and we can't bring outside clean energy into the city. So we're looking for clean energy alternatives in the city, and that's what these are. So the goal is, if we were not transmission constraint, we would be 100% clean by 2045 or wherever council dictates prior to 2045.
Is that transmission constraint within the city or outside of the city?
Inside the city would be considered distribution, and outside the city would be transmission, and it's definitely outside the city. It's transmission lines that go from the Southern California basin out to Meade, Arizona, Nevada.
Okay.
So I think another way to say it is, we aren't replacing, we're adding. So by putting more clean energy locally generated with no transmission requirement, that frees up a certain amount of space on the transmission that we can then refill with more renewable energy that we can bring in. So it's just, instead of saying that our limitation on clean renewable is based on 200 megawatts of transmission, now we've got 40 to 50 megawatts produced right here. That's 40 to 50 megawatts more we can bring in on the transmission system that can replace it. That's essentially, I think, Mark, do I have that somewhat right? I didn't want the notion that we were taking existing energy and just replacing it so that we had no net gain.
No, that's correct. It's my bad. I was thrown for a loop through the question, and you explained it much better than I did.
Okay. Going back to the cost, and I do think of it as a cost for some people. I appreciate that you think it's an investment, but people that can afford it, it's an investment. People that can't afford it, it's a cost. What would be the average increase per month or bi-monthly on the energy bill for a customer? Instead of using percentages, what's the dollar amount?
I have that number, Steve. Let me find it.
Sure. You or Tony, if you have it.
Absolutely. For the average single family, it was, here we go. We were looking at a rate increase of about, or a bill increase starting in 2022 of about $5.49 a month, and then that would increase going forward by whatever was 1%. So an average over that 22 to 25 period, we're looking about $5.55 for a single family and about $3.11 a month for a multifamily.
Okay. The other thing I just want to say is I like the thought of the more passive way of saving energy that you talked about with just voluntary reduction, talking to commercial customers. And it would be good to get a list of all of that type of thing that we could do that's really doesn't have much of a cost, and look at putting together a program like that as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jasmadarian. My brief comments, I definitely think we should work with the top 10 customers we have, the most that consume, work out an individual program with them and see how we can do cost savings or demand reduction. And you know, from their business perspective, it makes sense to cooperate with the city, obviously. I do have comments about the COSA. So the way I see the COSA that it was done in the old times is when GWP was the generator and the distributor. And so it was pretty much easy to charge per unit of electricity delivered. But that model is changing. A lot of, well, I know you bought Sunrun in a way that you're still just buying the energy and you're in charge of distributing. But there are net metering that is being done, I believe, in the city. And GWP is delivering or connecting these houses where they may use very little energy and may pay very little, but they're still connected, and should something happen, they need to be connected. I think what I'm trying to reach at is to decouple the cost of the energy from the cost of distributing that energy, so that we can have a COSA that impacts everybody in a fair way. It doesn't seem to me fair where you've got a single resident that's generating energy and it's net metering, not through the Sunrun program, but maybe through separately. And it's using very little energy, but the cable and all the services to that house has to be maintained and paid like any other house. So my hope, my objective, or my comment here is that the COSA takes into consideration the decoupled nature of generation and distribution that GWP is doing at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mr. Kadiki. And I think, Tony, you can chime in here, obviously, but we actually do look at the costs as fixed costs versus variable costs. So fixed costs is infrastructure that, regardless of how much energy you use, has to be maintained and kept up. So that's a fixed cost component. Then the variable charge is the energy itself and how much of that energy you use.
Okay.
So the component isn't just all about the infrastructure. There is a certain percentage of it and that we factor in. And we look at that each time we do a COSA. Tony, I don't know if you have anything to add.
The thing I'd add to that is, to your point that different services customers utilize different services of Glendale Water and Power like they would any electric utility. So within the COSA, it's delineated so where it's almost a la carte type of options you would have if you want to price things in that way. And so all that functionality is there. So if you're this type of customer and you're utilizing distribution but not much production or what have you, you can pull in each slice of the system or the types of services and products that Glendale Water and Power offers and show those costs just with that piece. So you can get very delineated and detailed as far as how each customer uses the system and the costs in which those are incurred.
And that's actually one of the other functions of the COSA is it meets the legal requirement that we are setting our rate structure that's in an equitable manner and that no one class is paying more than another, or I should say no one class is subsidizing another, and that everybody pays exactly what it costs to provide them the energy in totality. And then as Tony said, it has a lot of different component parts depending on which classification you're in.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move to the public comment question, and then we'll come back to all the commissioners for a final round. So I have on line one, Ms. Jennifer Pinkerton.
Hello, Commissioner.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to acknowledge the staff's hard work. Also comment that I'm very excited about VPP. I think that'll be a new breakthrough template that other cities follow. But I do want to preface my comments with the fact that I worked at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power solar program that was prior to Commissioner Flanagan's affiliation with that program. But I'm surprised by the strategy that emphasizing the residential market. At GWP, we did just the opposite. We first put solar on our own facilities to in effect help prime the pump for commercial installations. And I know we're talking strictly solar PV installations versus what's being discussed here today, significantly different, but I still think there's something to be learned from that. We also conducted a lot of peer-to-peer meetings where we had companies that first put in large installations such as the Cathedral, Neutrogena, some post offices. We invited them to peer-to-peer meetings where they could talk to other commercial customers who are considering solar. We found those to be very effective. I think the strategy of reaching out to 3,000 to 4,000 households when you could probably achieve the equivalent outcome by reaching out to dozens of large commercial customers is just a little surprising for me. You want the bang for your buck, I would think you would go for the larger customers first. And just one other comment, and again, this is years ago, strictly solar PV installation. Our program where a residential or commercial customer would install solar on their roof and just be a generating station and not utilize any of that power on site was never a very popular option. So hopefully you can extrapolate some lessons learned from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pinkerton. And one second. So if, Mr. Zern, I'm not sure if you want to answer or how do you want to do this?
Ms. Pinkerton makes some very, very good points. This, again, let me just reiterate, I think in some of the questions that Mr. Flanagan had and my answers to that is, boy, we are by no means stopping here. It was, when we did the Clean Energy RFP, we left it pretty wide open for folks to come in and propose different things. We actually just didn't get a lot of bite on the commercial sector. We even went, and I had asked Mark and Craig and Christine to go back to some of the folks who proposed and poke them a little bit and say, can you add more multifamily on this? Can you put this into commercial? And a lot of the firms weren't comfortable. This was their niche. This is where they felt comfortable. So it was at that point that we felt we're going to have to do another phase that is going to just look at nothing but commercial and attack that separately and nuance it in such a way as to make it very so that folks will be interested in doing it. And it may include, I mean, I like the idea of where you have the peer group and have folks who are running businesses who have benefited from putting in systems, telling other businesses about their experience, businessman to businessman or business person to business person. But I think that's what we are, that'll be the bulk of that RFP that goes out to strictly look at commercial, and rolled into that will be the demand response as well, where we one phase is, can we put installations in your facility to help you and help us? The other is, can we do things that will allow you to reduce load at peak that helps all of us as well? So it just, in this particular process, even though we left it very, very open, it didn't materialize. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop. So that's just a focused effort now on the commercial sector that we are moving towards, including, as I said, one aspect of it is our own facilities, which is commercial in nature. It just happens to be where we have more control over it. So yeah, that's another phase. I think what Ms. Pinkerton said rings true.
Thank you, Mr. Zern. Okay, I have on line 2 Louise Amezcua. Go ahead, Louise.
Hello?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners and Mr. Zern. My name is Luis Amezcua, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Sierra Club. Really appreciate Seth's work and positive comments in this important subject, and we agree that we are in unprecedented times with a global pandemic and also extreme weather events that are being caused by climate change. I wanted to, before speaking generally, kind of touch on 2 specific issues that came up in the presentation, one on cost and the other on base load. So on cost, I think it'd be helpful here to look at the cost comparison between the original Grayson plan and what is being proposed now. I understand that Grayson could have been financed with a long-term bond, but I think the key thing here to keep in mind is that the clean energy we are building right now is we're going to have to build it anyway in the future, and we're going to need more of it. Financing Grayson, though, even over the long term, has the potential of saddling Glendale ratepayers with a stranded asset given California's climate goals, and clean energy isn't going to be a stranded asset. The LA Times today timely published an article with a study that essentially said that new investments in gas now will ultimately be a stranded asset. And this doesn't even take into account Glendale's desire to be at 100% clean energy by 2030 and the ongoing conversations at the state level of accelerating our current zero carbon target from 2045 to 2035. In other words, any new investments in gas is a huge financial risk that we need to take into account here. And we agree with Commissioner Flanagan's comments on costs regarding societal benefits, because local clean energy is going to create local jobs, is going to enhance resilience, and there's also the cost of us having to address the climate change impacts we are dealing with today. On the need for base load, with all the work that you're all doing and the really exciting conversation of, Glendale making progress as a utility of the future, base load is contrary to Glendale's goals here. The idea of base load kind of ignores the advances we have made in the energy sector space and all the progress. Because base load, we used to think of it as a time when we were relying on nuclear and coal plants that wouldn't be able to ramp it up and down as easily. And so there were not a lot of alternatives back in the day. But now we have clean energy alternatives, and we can have a more flexible grid that doesn't need base load because we have batteries, we have clean energy, we have demand response.
Louise, I'm
And
going to
we're
give
able
you
to respond.
2 more minutes, please.
Yeah, and we're able to respond to customers' needs in real time and keep the lights on by utilizing the technology that we have now. And I'll end with saying we support moving forward with all these 3 programs. We urge you to move with the urgency we need to get these projects done, and we agree that we shouldn't be losing momentum here. We further support continuing to move forward with building more local clean energy, and we think deploying batteries can help with the debt curve over generation problem that Steph mentioned, and it could also reduce our peak demand. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thanks for your work.
Thank you, Louise. All right. Next, I'm going to take line 3, which is Kate Unger. Okay.
Oh, hi. Hopefully you can hear
Kate,
me.
yes, you're online, and you have 3 minutes, please.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Kate Unger, hello, and thanks to the commissioners and staff. And I'd like to thank GWP for all the work it's done to put together these projects and the report. For those of you who recognize my name, you'll know I've been eagerly awaiting for an update on these projects since the approval to move forward last year, and it's so great to hear what's happening now. We need to move forward on all three of these proposed projects. They're exciting programs. We in the community appreciate them and fully support them. And then let's build on them because there's so much potential and need for clean energy in Glendale. We know that Glendale needs to shift to clean energy, both because the law requires it and because it's the right thing to do, so that Glendale can be part of the climate solution, not the climate problem. And we really appreciate all of GWP's efforts so far and challenge GWP to go even farther in finding every possible way to add clean energy to its portfolio as quickly as possible. As Mr. Zern said, these are unprecedented times. The climate emergency is in high drive now. Glendale simply has to stop burning gas. We need to put out multiple solicitations and throw everything we possibly can at this problem. The costs of the accelerating climate emergency will swamp any costs of these clean energy programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Unger. Okay, unless somebody mentions anything that they want to respond, I'm just moving on, okay? So next I have online is Monica Campagna.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. This is Monica Campagna, and I just want to applaud the utility for everything you're doing. It's a very robust program that you're talking about, and I really hope that all of these efforts go forward that you've been mentioning tonight. Very, very exciting. I just wanted to add that I'd be interested to know if the utility is looking at installing 75 megawatts of battery storage at Grayson up front instead of waiting and doing it in 2 phases at this point. We know if that would be possible to do by next summer when we will be needing it again a lot. Also interested to know about the commercial program, when you think the RFP might go out for that, and if it would include parking lot solar. I'm really excited to see you guys are talking about that and that it has been a consideration, and that you're talking to companies about what will get them interested. Very supportive of your demand response projects within the commercial environment. Would love to know the timeline of the new RFP that went out for citing solar on municipal properties and all of the transmission considerations that that's going to take into account. I'd love to know if the municipal projects that might come out of that could begin before that RFP timeline, which I believe is ending at the end of June, if it goes on the timeline that you would prefer. I'd like to know if some of those projects can get started earlier so that they're in place next summer as well. And finally, for Lime, I think they proposed a bit more megawatts than what was actually accepted in the proposal. And since that's such a good deal, that particular program, I'm wondering if you would consider, again, increasing to the max that they offered, which I think was closer to 20 megawatts instead of 8.3. Thank you so very much, and really congratulations, great job. You guys are doing an awesome job with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campagna. Mr. Zern, if we can get the Lime proposal, I believe was 20.4 megawatt, but now we're doing 8.3. What was the holdup or the concern?
Well, again, as I had stated, we were looking at projects, and we challenged the proposal to make sure these were projects that they could deliver on. Mark and Christine can possibly give you some of the details on that, but my sense is that when we got to the point of saying, what can you absolutely deliver, not what, conceivably could occur, we went with what we knew versus what might be. Now, that doesn't mean that in the future we can't look to expand it, see how the first initial program goes and expand it, and there's opportunities for us to continue that. But I don't know, Mark, if you have any other comments on that.
Yeah, I believe that the initial proposal was with demand response, and that was what Franklin was taking care of, demand response. So we were very conscious to make sure that we weren't engaging with companies that were stepping on each other or trying to compete with the same customer.
Okay. So I'm gonna circle around with regards to the commissioner one final times to see if anybody has comments, questions, and then we will go ahead and move forward. Commissioner Avanesian, any comments or questions? You're muted, Commissioner Avanesian. There you go.
Okay. Our bills are calculated based on peak load that we are spending in a special day. So one of these nonprofit organizations was asking me, they were kind of like idle in this COVID time, but one day they were doing lots of, maintenance there. There were like drills there. I mean, electrical equipment there. Then suddenly their bill was much more than normal time that they were using, previously. And they were surprised. They were asking me. Then I just investigated. I realized that the calculation is based on the peak that you have in that month. So my question is, this program, solar program, how is going to affect that peak value?
Mark, do you have any insight?
I'm not really the person for bills. I usually deal with things on the outside, but this is the first time I heard that your bill is being based on peak. Peak would connotate time of use, and I'm not sure if the gentleman that you're referring to has got time of use rate. I'm not versed in the Glendale Water and Power rate structure.
We have POU rates that are available for customers who want to voluntarily go on. We usually work with the customer to make sure that it is a benefit to them. I think Mr. Avanesian is referring to the demand charge, and you heard me talk a little bit about that earlier. And so we found this with a few of our commercial customers who have been especially impacted by COVID, is that demand charge is set, and it's based on the previous year's use. So even though they might not be using it at the same, and I think I had sent you a letter in that regard, Mr. Avanesian, is that they may not be using it the same way. Their bills aren't showing or reflecting as big of a decrease as they would like, because it was, again, set based on the previous year. Now, the good news of that is, based on the lower this year, the demand charge will be for any company or any customer considerably lower next year. But it is part of what the COSA is based on. It is part of what Proposition 26 requires us to do. And I'm not so sure about the peak question. I don't know if Craig may have insight or Tony on that. But generally speaking, I think what you're speaking to is the demand charge. Now, this program that we're talking about today on the VPP, I don't think that has any impact on that, other than its impact on overall revenue. Craig, if you have any comments.
No, I think you answered it. I believe what was being referred to is the demand charge. To the extent if they could participate in the commercial Franklin program, they would go in and do an audit to help them identify where they could permanently reduce demand. Wouldn't have to be just on a peak day. They would go through and do an audit of the system and identify ways to lower demand that they could do pretty much on a regular basis on their own, not just when we call it an event. So that could be helpful to them. But you explained it perfectly well. The demand is set every 12 months, and they will go down going forward because of the COVID reductions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on next to Commissioner Flanagan. Commissioner, if you have any comments, questions that you'd like to raise.
Just one. Thank you, Chairman, or President. This issue of obviously a number of times, as it should, and the public comments also reinforce that we want to go green, and we want to do that as cost effectively as possible, and with as small rate impacts, or to minimize rate impacts as much as possible. The only thing, I mean, I really appreciate this presentation. I must say I go away without really a clear understanding of how cost effective these programs are compared to Grayson, compared to other programs that we could run. We've mentioned this a few times, that commercial sector programs generally you get more of a bang for the buck, and they're not in here. So if we're really trying to maximize clean energy and do it as cost effectively as possible, it seems as though we're maybe, at least in this phase, we're not on the most cost effective path. So I don't want to derail the process, but I think that's something that we're going, as we want more and more clean energy on the system, as there will inherently be rate impacts on the system that could be billed. We could have lower bills, but higher rates. Remember that if you participate in these programs. So, but still, I think we're going to need to articulate to the public very clearly how these programs are cost effective. And cost effectiveness takes many lenses. It's as basic as you know, it could be the bill impact. What happens to your bill? It could also factor in societal benefits in another screen, so that we have various ways of looking at this. Things that are maybe cost effective in the short term, it's different than things that will be cost effective in the long term. So I just think we as a utility need to be able to very clearly articulate that to the public. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Flanagan. All right, Commissioner Jasmadarian, any comments or questions?
I'm going to say I agree with Commissioner Flanagan on the cost effectiveness of selling it to the public the right way, telling them how much it really costs and what all the benefits are going to be for them moving forward. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Jasmadarian. With regards to my comments, I want to applaud everybody who worked on this project. From the feedback I'm getting, cost is a concern, but that's always a concern, and we are charting into new territories. With regards to, I would like to see us move much faster with regards to the commercial programs and even the utilities own. And I know with our own municipal buildings and what have you, and I know the RFPs are there. So let's move on those much faster. They may impact how it seems that they're to be more cost effective than this current route. But again, I don't want to stop this route. This needs to be done as well, whether we do it now or later, it doesn't matter. So let's get going in that regard. With that said, the next, first, Mr. Zern, if you want to have any final comments you want to say.
Yes, sir. For you, Mr. President, members of the Commission, I appreciate your patience today and listening to us, and your input was, all of it was very valuable. I think to what Mr. Flanagan had indicated about cost effectiveness, I couldn't agree more, and it's what I was referring to earlier about, it's part of why I want to make sure that we've got an up-to-date and accurate COSA, and then to bring that out to the public, to put it in context of what it is we're getting, and not just say it's just more expensive, or it appears to be more expensive, but talk about the benefits of that in relation to the cost. And it may well be, unfortunately, I think the situation we're in is probably going to taint it a little bit, but overall, I think generally speaking, it isn't terrible, from a cost impact standpoint. Of course, again, the folks that I talked about, we've got 13,000 customers who are on a rate assistance program, which means that they qualify under the federal poverty guidelines. So we've got a lot of people who any kind of a rate increase is going to affect. But again, as Mr. Flanagan said, you got to put it in context with what other benefits, maybe non-monetary benefits that you're getting out of that, and where that's going to lead us, and that eventually, we may find ourselves in a situation where we are very sustainable, but also affordable as we begin to fine tune and look at different opportunities. So, and on the commercial, we're forging ahead. We had, you may have remembered, we were ready to put in a battery storage, and and solar project on the Civic Center parking structure. And unfortunately, we ran into a bit of a jam there in that we only had one firm to bid, and the firm did not do an extensive enough engineering analysis of the structure. And then subsequently, they backed out because they just didn't have that information. So what we've done to make sure that doesn't get derailed is we're just going to conduct our own structural analysis of the facility, have it done, then we're going to go back out into the market and see what kind of response we get from developers to come in and put that on. You know, full PV panels on the roof of the structure, battery storage, and we begin to feed that back in. And you know, these are the kind of projects also when you develop, and it's something we didn't talk about, but when you develop the city projects, these can be considered community renewable energy projects that we're able to contribute back to folks who may not be able to put solar on their roof or afford that. This can go into the general, you know, power mix, and we can pass that along to all of our customers. So those things, and I know one of the speakers had talked about it too. So those things are all ongoing, and we're pushing as hard as we can, and with the staff constraints that we have, we are continuing to go out there. The commercial RFP should be ready probably early next month. I believe that the city facility proposals are due at the end of next month. So these things are moving, and as fast as we can get them out and get folks vetted and get the council to get approval, we'll start seeing programs come online consistently, I believe, for the foreseeable future. So with that, I'm going to let Christine, Ms. Godinez, go over some of options on what you can do as far as recommending and going forward. So just some things for you to think about. So with that, Christine.
So, Mr. President, members of the Commission, you have in your packet of materials a very, very open-ended motion for your recommendation to the city manager and council. And we deliberately wanted to provide you an open-ended recommendation so that you could craft whatever recommendation felt right to you, whether it is with regard to one or more of the clean energy programs and directing, or recommending, I should say, that the city manager and city council direct staff to move forward with those, or, certain of those programs, whether it be on a full scale or a pilot basis, as well as you may want to make a recommendation with regard to the cost piece. How do we pay for this? And perhaps doing a cost of service analysis or evaluating other options for funding the programs. So again, very open-ended. It's really your preference. It can be a combination of things that you recommend, not just one, but I'll open the floor to the commissioners, to make a motion or suggestions as to how to proceed. And with any motion, we of course want a second.
Okay. Now, to allow any of the commissioners, anybody wants to think out loud or propose a motion? Go ahead, Commissioner Flanagan.
I'd be happy to try it. I'd like to move a motion that salutes the Glendale Water and Power staff work thus far and takes the recommendation of staff, in this case, to move forward with the three programs that have been brought forward. I'd like to move that we move expeditiously, since this process has been going on for a couple of years. I don't think we should slow down. I think in any event, we're going to want this clean energy capacity in the future. And so I think even if the COSA it will take 6 months, I think we should still move forward. So my motion is to pass all three, promote all three, with the caveat that we will then be looking at next phases together and try to find out what's absolutely best for the Glendale community.
Mr. President, can I just ask a question of clarification with Mr. Flanagan on that motion? So definitely approving the programs. I don't want to put words in your mouth, obviously, but you do support the new COSA so we can develop the cost and the rate analysis to properly convey that and present that to the public. I think that's what you were meaning. And then, but not slowing down or stopping. Would that be adding the pilot phase to the program?
Well, I appreciate the notion of pilot programs, but again, California's on fire. I don't think we should let the COSA slow us down at all. I don't think we need a pilot program at this point. You guys have done a great job of vetting these programs and these vendors. So my motion is to go ahead with the full-scale programs right away. Then, yes, absolutely to support the COSA, and that will help inform us with next phases of development. Very good.
Mr. Zern, I have a question with regards to our obligations with Sunrun. So how do we end up paying them? They're going to install 3,000 or 4,000 rooftops. Is that when we pay them, or as they install one, we pay them? How does that work?
And I'll let Craig or Mark speak to the details, but it's a relatively front-loaded process, whereas a lot of the costs are within that first 4-year phase, and then we would pay the energy as we took it, the demand charge or the standby charge, and the energy as we take it. But Craig, maybe you can give a little more detail.
Yeah, so we would pay them for the generation from the system from when the things were installed. So very quickly, that would go up to about $9 million after about 3 years, and you would pay $9 million a year for 25 years.
Okay.
So you're paying for the kilowatt hours produced by the system and by the power coming out of the battery.
And that $9 million would be the gross cost. So what we had showed you was the net cost, but we would have to pay Sunrun the gross cost, and then we would realize savings in other areas that help overall create a lower net cost.
So let's say if we adopt this and this is year 2022, what's the first year check we're going to send to Sunrun?
So, Mr. President, this is Mark Young. This is like a power purchase agreement. So when they produce energy, we will pay them on a monthly basis. So there's a phase-in period of 4 years. So we're giving them a little leeway for them to get to where they need to be. We're still requiring them to meet that requirement at the end, but they give them a little bit of leeway in those 4 years to ramp up.
Okay.
But as the solar is being produced and it's being pushed out onto the distribution grid, we will be paying them a monthly fee based on that output. And then we will also be paying them a capacity charge based on the amount of battery that's installed and available to Glendale to be able to utilize.
So for that first 4-year period, we'll pay up to, let's call it year 4. At year 4, we would, based on the modeling and what we showed you, we'd be up to that $9 million figure. And it would be something less than that leading up to that 4th year as they continue to install more, as Mark said, ramp up and install more equipment. But as soon as they start getting the first installations in, which they anticipate would be that first year, we'll be paying something. What that is depends on how many installations they put in, but we'll be buying whatever they install.
Okay.
So if they're really successful with that first year, we may be paying them the bulk of it right away.
Okay, very good. All right, so we have a motion from Commissioner Flanagan. Ms. Godinez, do you want to restate the motion exactly so that we know what if somebody could second it?
Well, that's a tall order to state it exactly. I'm going to do my best. And Commissioner Flanagan, if I get it wrong, please chime in and we can correct. So the motion would be moved by the commissioners that it is recommended to the city manager and the city council that GWP move forward expeditiously with all 3 programs on a full-scale basis, and that the council direct staff to look at the next phases of clean energy programs. And lastly, that the city council direct Glendale Water and Power to proceed with the cost of service analysis. Does that accurately capture what you were trying to do?
Christine, that's accurately captured and much better put than I put it, so thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay.
All right.
So is there a second?
Is there a second? I will second if there's no other second. Can I second, Ms. Godinez?
Pass the gavel.
Typically, you have to pass the gavel virtually, I guess, if no one else seconds it.
Okay, we'll give another chance if anybody else wants to second. Okay, I'll pass the gavel to Commissioner Flanagan.
Actually, can I give a substitute motion?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Jasmadarian, go ahead.
Is this the time for some-
If you could speak closer to your microphone, we can't hear you.
Is this the time to give a substitute motion?
Is this the time?
If you wanted to amend the motion, you could do that. That's definitely a possibility. We could do that.
Okay. So I would motion that we move forward with both Franklin and Line Group, and then start with 25% of the Sunrun until the cost of service analysis is done, and then based on the cost of service analysis, move forward with the rest of Sunrun.
Okay. And, all right, Christine, what's the next step at this point? There's a
Okay, so
counter motion.
Yeah, so essentially you've got two alternative motions on the table. It's not necessarily, it sounds like an amendment to the first motion. So maybe we can take them one at a time. We had Commissioner Flanagan's motion. We can see if there's a second to that motion and then take a vote. And if not, we could do the second motion afterwards.
So I will second Commissioner Flanagan's motion. And Commissioner Flanagan, I'm passing the gavel to you for a second until I second your motion. Accept?
Yes.
Okay. So we got a first and a second. Now, what's the next step, Ms. Godinez?
Should take a vote.
Okay, let's get a vote on the motion that Commissioner Flanagan did, please.
Commissioner
Maybe you want to
Vanessian?
call each commissioner's name.
All right, I think, all right,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Commissioner Vanessian?
You're muted, Commissioner Avanesian.
I'm not convinced. I'm just seeing that this presentations and all the calculations, and generally speaking, it's not complete. So it's not kind of like convincing what's going on. So my vote is no.
Commissioner Jasmadarian?
No?
So no.
Commissioner Flanagan?
Yes.
President Kidikian?
Yes. So what do we do now, Christine?
It did not pass because you don't have a majority of the commissioners present voting for it. So then you could move on to Commissioner Yasmadarian's motion. And if there's a second, you can proceed with a voice vote on that, and we can take it from there, next steps.
All right, Commissioner Jasmadarian's motion is there. Is there a second?
So to recap, that motion was to recommend to the City Council and the City Manager to proceed with the Franklin and Lime Clean Energy Program, to proceed with 25% of the Sunrun Virtual Power Plant Program, to proceed with a cost of service analysis, and then based upon the cost of service analysis results, consider proceeding with the remainder of the Sunrun program, is what I wrote down. Is that what you intended, Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay. So you have a first, you just need to see if you have a second for that particular motion.
I think we are falling behind in our speed in adopting this clean energy. I urge my commissioners, my fellow commissioners, to move post haste. We are behind. It's going to cost money, yes, but the alternative is going to cost a whole lot more. Unless I would urge my fellow commissioners to, like I said, the question I asked with regards to Sunrun, and I know a lot of commissioners are concerned about that 240 million that they're seeing, but we're only going to pay for what they deliver, and if they don't deliver, they're not going to get paid. So I'm not seeing the concern with Sunrun at this point, and unless I have it wrong, and somebody could explain it to me.
The only thing I would add is we want them to deliver all of it. We're not basing this on we hope they do. We want it all. And so I think that's the assumption we should go by. We want all of the power.
Good. President, can I make an amendment to my motion, please?
Sure.
I think that the only difference between its motions is whether it's a pilot program or not. And I don't have to phrase this, but how about this? How about if we let the programs go at 50% right out of the block? And then we have in our contract with Sunrun, that based on the findings of the cost of service study, if the cost of service study suggests that we're really doing the wrong thing after 6 months, that we then change course and either terminate that contract or reduce it or change it in some way. So I'm just saying, come out of this, keep the momentum going. It's 2 years since this process started. Keep it going now. Staff has done a great job. Get these companies out there, start to get this capacity that we all know we need. And then if the cost of service study suggests that we're just doing absolutely the wrong thing, that we then take an action to make a corrective course.
I'll second that, please.
Okay. And if I could, Mr. President, just a clarification on that too. Sorry, Mr. Flanagan, but in essence, if we were to put a timeline on it, so we come back after 12 months from the initiation. In 1 year, the COSTA should be done. We look at what the first year is. We do the analysis and we come back and report out what we found. And I don't mean to correct you, but I don't think we're doing the wrong thing. It's just a matter of what the end financial impact is going to be, so that everybody's aware of that. I think this is the right thing to do, period. But we do need to be considerate of the affordability component. So I don't mean to change your amendment, but does that sound reasonable? We don't put a restriction on the pilot program. It's just whatever you can do in a year. Hell, maybe they could do 50% in a year. I don't know. But after that 1 year and we have the COSTA, we come back and report out.
I think that makes complete sense. I think we're all getting what we want, which is we want to get this clean energy program going, but we want to be cautious. And once we get more information from Tony and his group, we need to evaluate. And so if you can structure the contract with Sunrun, I know you can, to do that, I think we've got what everybody is after.
Should we,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Christine, should we, as long as everybody is amenable, both the author and the second, with adding something that says after 12 months from the initiation, the GWP will come back and report out to the commission and subsequently the council?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so that we're clear, Ms. Godinez, do you want to repeat the motion, the second, and then we'll move on?
So what I heard was a motion recommending to the city council and then the city manager to move forward expeditiously with all three programs on a full-scale basis for a 12-month period, to direct staff to negotiate a termination provision, if necessary, based upon the COSTA or the initial program results, for staff to report back within 12 months of initiation of the program to the GWP Commission and Council. Are you retaining, Commissioner Flanagan, the direction to staff, I imagine, to look at the next phases of the clean energy program and proceed with the COSTA?
Yes. Let's retain that. And one correction or edit to your to the motion is not that necessarily after 12 months that we would necessarily terminate, but we might want to change the intensity or the participation levels or something. Maybe we have the option to terminate or modify the program structure.
We even might want to increase it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. So that would be to move forward expeditiously with all three programs on a full-scale basis for a 12-month period, direct staff to negotiate either a termination provision or a modification to the program structure if necessary based upon the cost of service analysis or the initial program results. For GWP staff to report back to the Glendale Water and Power Commission and Council 12 months after initiation of the program. Then to direct staff to look at the next phases of clean energy programs and to proceed with a cost of service analysis. Okay, so I think we heard we had Commissioner Flanagan made the motion, and then Commissioner Jasmine seconded the motion. Is that right? Okay, great. So then we just will turn it over to Ms. Lee to do the voice vote.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote on it.
Commissioner Avanesian,
Yes, let's move forward with this one.
Commissioner Flanagan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jasmadarian,
Yes.
President Kadikian.
Yes. Okay. All right, let's move to the next action item, is that correct? Yeah, oral communication.
Or commissioners.
I don't see any lines lit up. No? Okay. Number 6 is agenda forecast. Let's go ahead with that.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the commission, as I mentioned, we have our next meeting right around the corner on the 5th. First order of business will be commission elections for secretary. The summer heat impacts report that I referred to earlier will have Mr. Keenan giving a strategic plan update, and we also are going to have our water folks give you a water resources update as part of that. And from there, then we can, you'll see we have a very abbreviated agenda forecast, but I think after our 10-5 meeting, we can talk a little bit more about the other programs and maybe even talk about having me update you on the RFPs that we have out, RFPs that are on development, timelines for those, and different concepts of where we are with, because again, as part of the COSTA, we will also be looking at net energy metering rates, TOU rates, EV rates. We're going to review everything. So those are all things that are eventually going to be on the agenda for you to consider as well.
So with regards to the GWP Commission election for secretary that's scheduled for October, I would suggest we just do those things together in December with the president and secretary. That's my suggestion. Christine, we could do that?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine to do that.
Okay, anybody opposes that? No. Okay. With regards to the October 5th meeting, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be out of town, so somebody else will have to chair, and that we can work out. And I don't have anything further with regards to the agenda forecast at this time myself. I'll give an opportunity. Commissioner Avanesian, any comments on the agenda forecast?
No, I don't have any comment.
Commissioner Jasmadarian, any comments on the agenda forecast?
No, no comment.
Sorry, Commissioner Flanagan, I skipped you. Any comments on the agenda forecast?
Just a quick question to Steve. Does that mean that we'll have the rate? You expressed in one of the last meetings you were going to come to a presentation about the new rate structures. I think, did I hear you say that would happen now after the COSA study is complete?
It probably will, because Tony's the one who's doing that analysis for us. So at this point, I'm not sure if we've even initiated that. But ideally, since we are going to do the COSA, we might put the two together. But we'll talk to Tony if it's possible to get those special rates, as I'm going to refer to them, ahead of time so we can talk about it.
Thank you.
Okay.
No other comments.
All right. So having no further issues on that, next is adjournment. Anybody wants to adjourn? Nobody wants to.
I'll motion for adjournment.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Jasmadarian. The motion to adjourn, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.